Hi, this is Ed Fitzpatrick. If you enjoy local politics as much as I do, be sure to join our friends at Rhode Island PBS for the show A Lively Experiment. Hosted by Jim Hummel, the weekly series features journalists, pundits, and politicians debating the stories and issues that matter most to us Rhode Islanders. Tune in to A Lively Experiment and be part of the conversation. Fridays at 7 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. Rhode Island has seen a series of cyber attacks over the past year, first on the Providence public school system and then on the state's public benefit system. Former Congressman Jim Langevin is helping the state train experts to respond to these attacks. He's the distinguished chair at the Institute for Cybersecurity and Emerging Technologies at Rhode Island College. He's here to tell us more. Congressman Langevin, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Ed.
So I covered you during your 22 years in Congress. I've got to ask, do you miss it?
I've always missed some things. It was an honor and a privilege of a lifetime for me to serve in Congress and represent the people of the state of Rhode Island for those 22 years. I miss, of course, constituent services and the national security work that I was involved with, especially on cybersecurity. But I'll tell you, politics has changed these days, and I tend to be more of a policy wonk. I feel for what my colleagues and the delegation are going through right now.
Yeah, what do you think it's like to be a Democrat in Congress today?
Going to be very unsettling and challenging dealing with this administration and this Congress and being in the minority in both the House and the Senate. Not fun, very challenging indeed.
So I just saw you on Rhode Island PBS in an episode about cybersecurity. Since leaving Congress, you've become the distinguished chair of the Institute for Cybersecurity and Emerging Technologies at Rhode Island College. So tell us about what the Institute does.
Well, I'm excited about this new role. We've built this program from the ground up. We are basically helping to educate the next generation of cyber defenders, cyber professionals, helping to fill this huge void that exists in the need for cybersecurity professionals to fill jobs that go unfilled right now. There are approximately 3,000 jobs in Rhode Island that go unfilled in cybersecurity, and by most estimates, there's more than 500,000 jobs nationally that go unfilled in cybersecurity right now because there just are not enough people in this profession with those skills. So we are helping to fill that void.
And they're good-paying jobs?
They are good-paying jobs. By many estimates, when someone graduates and has the right experience, could start a job with a six-figure salary. So we are highly encouraging people to go into the field of cybersecurity and come to Rhode Island College, where we have the first of its kind business-focused cybersecurity major and minor in cybersecurity.
First of its kind in the country?
In the state. And also we have our first baccalaureate degree in artificial intelligence and 2 minors in artificial intelligence.
And you're a RIC graduate, right?
I'm a Rhode Island College graduate, class of 1990, so just a few years ago, right?
A few years ago. And I know you helped get the Cybersecurity Institute off the ground. Why was it important to you, and why is it important to RIC?
Well, it's important for a variety of reasons. First of all, I spent a good part of my time in Congress leading the efforts on cybersecurity in the United States House of Representatives. There was no other member that did more or focused more on cybersecurity than I did in the Congress or the House or Senate. So I understand the challenges that we face. And basically when I left Congress, I wanted to continue to use this expertise that I had developed in a different way. And that way was to create this Institute on Cyber and Emerging Technologies at RIC. We not only want to educate the next generation of cyber professionals and cyber defenders, but we also want to be a resource to the community as well as to businesses, especially small businesses, in doing things like upskilling. Just recently, when the RI Bridges data breach happened, I was a resource in advising the governor on what the important steps were to be taken, and he and his team were actively doing many of these things already. The governor was the one that ordered the system to be taken offline once we realized how serious this was, and then getting out there very early and educating the public about what they needed to do to protect their identity because their data was going to be potentially put out on the dark web.
Yeah, you're talking about how, for those who don't know, Rhode Island Bridges, earlier this year, about 657,000 people had personal information potentially compromised in a cyber attack on Rhode Island's public benefit system. So why didn't the state have systems in place to prevent it, and what does the state need to do to ensure it doesn't happen again?
There's two things. There are some state systems, but also primarily this was a third-party vendor, Deloitte,
Right.
that was charged with housing the data, protecting the data and its systems. But the challenge is that the attack space is wide and relatively easy for the bad actors for anywhere to get in, whether it's a federal system, state system, small business, critical infrastructure. The bad guys only have to be right once, and we, the good guys, have to be right 100% of the time at being secure. It's going to be an ongoing challenge, and that's why we need more cyber professionals, cyber defenders in these jobs defending our networks.
The Providence Public School District had a similar problem when it acknowledged that personal student information was stolen in a cyber attack back in September. It included vaccination records, special ed details, and driver's license numbers. So how common are these type of attacks?
All too common. Not a day that goes by that someone isn't hit with some type of a cyber attack, cyber intrusion, or ransomware attack. I think that we've seen a proliferation of these types of cyber events because of the rise in the use of cryptocurrency, which is basically an untraceable currency.
Yeah, the ransomware group Medusa tried to get the money from the Providence School District. It didn't pay. But what's the best way for public entities to deal with this kind of attempted extortion?
Well, first of all, having good cyber defense is essential. Having trained professionals is obviously a key part of the equation. But also, everyone should be practicing good cyber hygiene. And that's one of the things that's probably still lacking in our public education system or public awareness campaigns, that we need to do more to educate the public that everyone has a role to play in cybersecurity. So practicing good cyber hygiene.
Yeah, what is cyber hygiene?
Cyber hygiene is it's a number of things. Having a strong password, not a common password. You don't want to use password 123, for example. Something that
now you tell me.
Right. You don't want to have an easy password that someone can guess easily. Phrases are best. Having multi-factor authentication turned on. If you want to get into your bank account, you put in your username and password. Your bank will then send you a temporary one-time code that's good for about a few minutes. You put that code in, and then it brings you to your account. Even if the bad actor has your username and password, if multi-factor authentication is turned on, they can't get into your account because they don't have your phone, for example. They don't have a way of getting that one-time code. If you can back up your data, that's important. Don't click on malicious links within an email, especially if you're not familiar with the person sending it. If you get an email with something and it has an attachment, before you open it up, use the cursor to hover over the address that it's coming from to make sure it's actually coming from that actual person. For example, if you get an email from your bank, it's very common that these cyber attacks start out with these days. They're very sophisticated, look very authentic, but then you hover on the address and it's going to, say, a Gmail account, for example, or not from the actual bank that is sending it, or some other type of thing that is not coming from your bank. It becomes obvious this is not an accurate email.
We'll have more with former Congressman Jim Langevin after a quick break. When you want to go beyond the headlines, let me recommend Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Rhode Island PBS Weekly is an award-winning news magazine broadcast that gives you the full story, powered by investigative journalism and narrative storytelling. New episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly drop Sundays at 7:30 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS. Watch past episodes at ripbs.org/weekly. That's ripbs.org/weekly. Are public entities more vulnerable to attacks like these than corporations, for example, or is it just that we hear more about it?
Well, it might be that corporations may be a little better defended if they have the resources to protect their systems, where maybe municipalities and nonprofits or school systems, they're always stretched for dollars, and it's challenging to always be running on the latest hardware and software, but it is important to make sure you are running on the latest hardware and software. By the way, that's one of the reasons why the Institute at Rhode Island College is so important, because we hope to eventually be able to provide some low-cost services to the state, to municipalities, to nonprofits, school systems, and small businesses at a lower cost than what they would pay in the commercial market. This could happen, by the way, thanks to the voters who approved the $73 million bond issue in the November election, and that will allow us to build a cyber building that will have a cyber range and a 24/7 security operations center.
What's a cyber range?
That's basically a self-contained command center, if you will, where students will learn in a real-world environment where they'll get hands-on experience on what it's like to have to deal with a cyber attack, what to look for, how to respond to it, how to remediate the problem. That right now is under construction at Rhode Island College. It'll be a physical room where students can learn, but also there'll be the opportunity for municipalities or nonprofits or small businesses to come. And it'll be a fee-for-service type system where people that come there can learn in a real-world environment and do tabletop exercises or live fire exercises that will help them to upskill their talents.
Now, I know you're a former Rhode Island Secretary of State, so can you tell us how important cybersecurity is when it comes to protecting elections?
Yeah, cybersecurity is very important when it comes to protecting elections and the integrity of elections, making sure that bad actors can't penetrate either the voter registration rolls or the voter systems themselves.
So what did you think of the Trump administration cutting 130 positions at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency that oversees the nation's critical infrastructure, including the federal efforts to secure election systems?
I'm very troubled by those developments, the cutting the positions at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that is responsible for protecting the .gov network, but also is the primary point entity and resource for state and local governments, tribal, territorial governments, and certainly election officials as well.
What are the implications of that? Well, what could it mean going forward?
Well, when CISA would get real-time threat information, they would share that information with election entities like the State Board of Elections or local boards of elections. That information is not going to get shared, most likely. It's going to be more difficult to share. So that is troubling, and it doesn't make any sense to me why the Trump administration would cut those funds. It's going to be even more difficult for CISA to do its job and help secure cyber networks at the local and state level.
And just recently, we saw Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordering U.S. Cyber Command to halt offensive cyber and information operations against Russia as Trump seeks to end Putin's war in Ukraine on terms that are seen as favoring Moscow. What did you make of that?
Well, again, another troubling article, although within the article I read that it's unclear whether this is a pause or why the pause is happening. But look, bad actors, foreign malign actors are trying to disrupt our elections all the time or our society with mis and disinformation. We know that Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are the most active bad actors trying to disrupt our elections or trying to sow seeds of discord among us, and that's very troubling. It's a classic intelligence operation, if you will. It's low cost, high payoff. All you have to do is sow seeds of doubt, for example, and that in of itself can divide us as Americans. It's like using free speech against us as a weapon. That's why having programs in place that help to counter mis and disinformation is really important.
Yeah, why do you think the Trump administration is retreating in these areas?
I can't really speculate because it makes no sense to me. This is a very troubling development. It seems as though there's a new world order that's emerging, and Trump seems to be cozying up to dictators versus Democratic allies.
Yeah, I've got to ask because the world just saw this the other day. What did you think of that meeting between Ukrainian President Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President Vance?
It was a stunning meeting. I thought it was an awful spectacle. Don't understand the tactics or the rationale behind that type of a public fight and discord that occurred. We need to, I believe, stand behind Ukraine, because I think Russia does have ambitions beyond Ukraine and potentially going into NATO countries. I have always been supportive of, and I know the delegation has been supportive of, providing aid to Ukraine. You're giving Ukrainians the tools to fight for their own independence and fight their own security in their own country, and not putting U.S. boots on the ground and not putting NATO boots on the ground. So I'm troubled by any kind of rift that would happen between the United States and Ukraine.
The Trump administration is cutting funding across the federal government, as you know. So is that going to jeopardize any of the funding for the Institute?
So right now we have funding in place for the first 3 years or so, and then we're going to be seeking grants and other funding.
But have there been any cuts yet that have affected the Institute directly?
Not yet,
okay.
And hopefully it doesn't, but we have to go out and we're going to be generating funding, and certainly seeking federal grants and federal funding would be a part of that.
Congressman Langevin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
You can see the Rhode Island PBS Weekly Cybersecurity story featuring former Congressman Jim Langevin at ripbs.org/weekly. Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe in collaboration with Rhode Island PBS. Today's episode was produced by Megan Hall. Audio mixing and mastering by Marissa Ewing of Hemlock Creek Productions. Our music is from APM. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. See you next week. Looking to binge watch all your favorite PBS shows? You need Rhode Island PBS Passport. Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, Rhode Island PBS Weekly, and many more. Watch them all, anytime, and from any streaming device. Learn more about this member benefit at ripbs.org/passport. That's ripbs.org/passport.